How about now? Thank you, everyone. Check 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Now, what I was saying was thank you for bearing with me through the technical difficulties while experiencing more technical difficulties. So thank you doubly. To begin with, I'd like to acknowledge that this work was conceived in the lands of the Narragansett, Mapuche, Aymara, Taino, and Lenape people. That's my grandma up there. All right, here we go. I am convinced of and compelled toward a pervasive, undisciplined field of vibrational force. When I say vibration, I don't leave the sonic alone, rather from the Latin vibrare. Vibration is what moves to and fro, asking not what something is, but rather how it is destabilized. Vibration proposes the possibility to move and to be moved. Essential Tremors is an attempt to trace and disentangle the knotted vectors of affect that flow out of and into a single vibrational nexus, specifically a phone call placed by my grandfather Manolo to my dad, his son David, on September 11th, 1973. Larger than life, my grandfather easily settled into caricature, verbose, ostentatious, charming. He had a booming voice and a conspiratorial demeanor. He once told me that he was a dentist back in Cuba. It turns out he wasn't. His favorite meal was steamed broccoli dipped in liquid cheese with an entire bottle of cheap Merlot. He smelled like Barbasol, hair dye, and cologne. Sometimes a stinky cigar. He called the briefcase that he carried everywhere, filled with fake documents pertaining to fake business deals, his attaché. He was erudite. He was a spy. He descended on our family home every couple of years when my dad and my uncle Chuck got the money and the will together to fly him up to New York for a Thanksgiving or Christmas. The morning after he would arrive, we unfailingly woke up to a box of fresh seafood on the doorstep. No return address or knock on the door. A gift from the shellfish mafia. It was during these intermittent holiday visits that I came to know him. My most immediate memory is really that scent that preceded him and lingered as his trace. And his gripping hands, fingers wrapped in clusters of gold rings. I remember how his hands always shook, and that he was very clean. How when he would groom, his attention on keeping steady was captivating. I remember standing next to him in the bathroom as he would carefully dye the roots of his hair with a tiny brush, and how he demonstrated clipping his nails and clipped mine. I remember it being a point of pride for him that he maintained beautiful cuticles. I remember how he would gently pat down the sides of his hair and how he would slap aftershave onto his rosacean cheeks. Let's get a picture of him up here. Here he is. There he is. As he got older, his shake got worse. It betrayed him. His struggle with it was noticeable. There being no other cause of the condition, it was diagnosed as an essential tremor. When my father's hand started to shaking, it became clear that it was in fact a hereditary essential tremor, and that in all likelihood I would get it next. Fascinatingly, the technical language used to classify the diagnosis is that of a wave, as the intensity of the condition is registered in hertz, frequency, and amplitude. My grandfather's essential tremor is my vibrational inheritance.
Last year. Okay, test 1, 2, test 1, 2.
Test 1, 2.
Where's your microphone? Microphone is here.
That doesn't work. Small. Test one, one, two.
Do you have your?
No, I'm not doing the mic.
No, I'm sure it's fine. Yeah.
That's it?
So, Dad,
Where is the mic? Where is the mic? Oh, yeah, the mic.
it picks up fine.
Okay. Tell me when I start talking.
Where do we leave off?
Oh, that's a good question.
I have no idea.
But there's a few things that we have not talked about Chile. I don't think so.
All right, start there.
Well, we already spoke about Chile, the revolution against Allende that was organized by the CIA, covered up, and even though the United States government denied it, especially Henry Kissinger and the rest of the members of the intelligence department, United States was involved 100%.
So I'm David Gonzalez, David Rafael Gonzalez Echevarria. I'm 64 years old. I'm half Cuban, half Puerto Rican or New Yorican, and like I say, all Bronx. I actually have very few memories of my dad as a child. The earliest memory I have of my father is the day that he left home.
My name is Lupe, L-U-P-E, Echevarria. I live in Ponte Vedra Beach, Florida. I was born in New York City in March 14th of 1932, so I'm 88 years old right now. I'll be 89 in March. I was married to Jake's grandfather, Manolo Gonzalez, whom I met at an office I was working at in New York City all those years ago. I was 21 when I married and divorced after I had Jake's father, David, and his older brother, Chuck.
All right, so as a form of introduction, my name is Charles Gonzalez, although Jake and Raina know me as Chuck, their Uncle Chuck, have been for a long time. But I was given the birth name of Charles by my father, Manuel Gonzalez, after his great-uncle Charles, who was murdered about a year or two before my birth by the police forces of Batista, who was the dictator at that point in the early 50s. I saw a picture of Charles once, and he's about the opposite look from my father as you possibly can be. He looked like an actor.
There was that time when I found him. It would have been 1970, the summer of 1970. I was 14. Different of Grandma's sisters had places in Miami. One of my Puerto Rican relatives told me that they knew where Dad's cousin Gloria worked at a beauty salon. So the whole sleuthing of it was not difficult. The difficult thing was making the decision to actually call. You know, that moment of dialing, because who knows what's on the other side. But just to cut to the chase, I made the call, and that very day, he showed up. And he showed up in a Cadillac. I think we went out for dinner, and his wife was there, Paula, and he was dressed to the nines. I mean, you know, those big glasses, and I don't know anybody who dresses like that. So within a couple of days, I had a sleepover at Dad and Paula's house. And that's where I saw all the pre-Columbian art. And I knew enough about the world to know that that was important. And art on the walls, and all this wine, and a beach, and a boat, and much more than what we had, you know, like a whole other level. You know, I go to bed in the guest room, and he says, if you need to use the bathroom, come into my suite. They had a master bedroom suite. And in the middle of the night, I open the door, and he jumps out of bed and points a .45 at me. You know? So, you know, there's a lot about your grandfather that was hyperbole. And it was a pathetic grandiosity in the hyperbole, just pathetic. At the same time, there was enough data points of truth that it's one of the confounding things is to know where the truth is and where the bullshit is.
I mean, I guess I have my assumption on why he pulled the gun on you, which is that he was already in a kind of fight or flight PTSD space. And so he didn't know who you were, and he got scared. And that was like a reflex.
Yeah, I think that his quote-unquote nerves were shot. I think that his constitution was already that way. I don't think he was like sort of a grounded person. He was an anxious, nervous person. And it's one of these things where, he has legitimate fear because he's like engaged with nefarious people in dangerous situations, But he could have killed me. That's real.
50% of what my father said were out and out fabrications and fantasies. 25% were stretches of the truth, and 25% had nuggets of actual reality behind them. So, for example, I have a copy of his FBI identification, which is an outright fabrication. It's really funny to see. On the other hand, I do have his letter from Richard Nixon, which is not a fabrication. You take what you get and you apply your own sense of reason and analysis to it, and understand what the context is. And listen, most people brag and expand on the truth. He just was a man. Remember, he was trained by the CIA to do just that, to manipulate the truth.
The next year, I was in college. I was towards the end of my 16th year. My birthday's in October, so I was a month short of 17. And just to paint that picture again, these dormitories were very long. There were 2 stories. The girls were upstairs and the boys were downstairs. Very long hallways, like maybe the buildings were like 200 feet long. And in the landing in between was one of these old phone booths. But they used to be made of oak, wooden phone booths with the accordion kind of doors. And when someone got a phone call, whoever was nearby picked up the phone and yelled. And if no one answered, they would go up. If it was a guy, they'd go downstairs. If it was a girl, they'd go upstairs, and they would yell. And they had to. They had not, but it was just this thing. That was the system. And I was just lucky to be around, because who knows? Just like, it's a dorm. It could have been anywhere. And it was Gonzalez, like that. Like I've told you so many times.
Hello? Dad? Where are you? It's on. Are you okay? What's going on? Where are you? Jesus. I won't.
Would you mind just quickly going back and describing like what the phone call maybe sounded like, or?
Yeah, it was disorienting. First of all, the ambience of it, what surrounded his voice, was confusing. You'd have to know what a long-distance phone call sounded like back then, because it was common for long-distance phone calls to be scratchy and to get disconnected. It wasn't, it was, and depending on where you were calling to and from, it would be better or worse. And even sometimes, time of day would change the quality of the call. But there was a very recognizable kind of quality of the long-distance calls if it was between two landlines. This was not that. So immediately it was disorienting. And it was my dad. And in his voice, there was a desperation. Nervous, desperate, emotional energy. So in the first seconds, we're not in Kansas anymore. Just the soundscape itself commanded or demanded deciphering, but it was indecipherable. Until the little cues that came out. Chile, you could feel the terror in his voice. And he said, Allende is dead. Then the clicks and the low resonant things, they start to make sense as this is like a battleground vibe. And then multiple, and I didn't know this until later, the whole sequence of like a walkie-talkie to an aircraft carrier, to an Air Force base, to a landline, to a little dormitory in Vermont. But when I think back on it, you could just hear the layers of all that. And I remember feeling like I needed to reassure him. Like to be there for him. He needed something from me. He wasn't calling me to be fatherly. He was calling me because he was in a panic. He needed something. He needed reassurance. A desperate, fearful thing. And in the middle of it was this boastful, almost celebratory declaration about Allende's death.
Though we entered this story through a familial line, ultimately it is a loop imbricated in copper. Copper, not the specter of communism, was the motivation behind the U.S. intervention in Chile. U.S. telecommunications manufacturer International Telephone and Telegraph, or ITT, coveted Andean copper for its conductivity. So they colluded with Richard Nixon, Henry Kissinger, and the CIA to fund covert operations that would remove the democratically elected head of state, Salvador Allende. The same operations that brought Manuel to Santiago. ITT and the CIA had used exactly the same playbook 9 years earlier, in 1964, to instigate a coup against another popular leftist leader, João Goulart of Brazil. Also, importantly, copper wire systems are central to the perception of authenticity in the phone call that moved my father so much. The infrastructure of electric life is laid in copper. The matrices of interconnection that structure so much of relatedness, at least these days, is built upon sedimentary layers of global copper meshes. The innermost layer of this vibrational lattice is, of course, the veins of conductive ore that transfix the earth herself. With the exception of overhead power lines, which can be made from aluminum, nearly all electrical signals of all kinds are carried along copper or copper alloy wire. Every phone call ever was transmitted along it. Given its centrality to communications, copper is fundamentally implicated in the rise of contemporary post-nationalism. Therefore, the actual value of it is incalculable. But what makes copper so irreplaceable? Conductivity, which, simply put, is a material's capacity to transmit electrical energy or through or across itself. Copper is second only to silver in conductivity and, for now, is significantly more abundant. Electromagnetic energy is not delivered like water through pipes. It's a vibrationally effective chain reaction that runs like a shiver through its conductor. The coat of the network's copper body is molted and reconstituted at the speed of light with each electrical impulse. The materiality of electric energy is the trace of the network itself, as the current is composed of those valence electrons which, until agitated, were part of the copper itself. To return to the phone call and the impression it left on David, the audio he experienced was literally constituted of the molecular sheddings of the imperfect network through which it traveled. This sort of noise, while it lends itself to descriptions as timbre, texture, color, affect, character, surface, exceeds granular causal recognition. It's kin to the sort of recognition that something or someone has been through it, without any understanding of what the it is. I believe this dense accumulation of electrical trace contributed to the arresting sonority of the phone call. Finally, these same wire networks implicated in the phone call remain materially crucial to the production and dissemination of this work itself. The copper wiring in the telephone lines and Wi-Fi coaxial cables that carry this clearly flawed stream were in all likelihood extracted at great cost from Chilean mines. The vibrant metal is deeply embedded in the work as medium, cause, and effect. To sound it out, we have to return to the vibrational nexus.
Cuando yo salí por... ahí salí yo, como si fuera un panameño.
¿Y te has cambiado de nombre o no?
No, mi nombre era Manuel González. Pero con S, no con Z. Con S. Y entonces salimos. Éramos un grupo, pero lo primero...
¿Tu misión cuál era?
La misión mía era la investigación económica y política, infiltrar dentro de todos ellos. Era la misión mía, nada de terrorismo. Aquello, llegamos y nos quedamos en el hotel en la montaña. Como yo era millonario, industrial, suizo, y dábamos fiestas, yo conocía al que era secretario particular de Allende, muchacha, vale, orgía, champán, aquello era cara. Bueno, y entonces reuniendo informaciones, la descomposición moral que había dentro de las Fuerzas Armadas era muy grande. Las Fuerzas Armadas querían ya tumbar a Allende, sin o con el apoyo del gobierno americano. Entonces, ya habían incautado a la Ford Motor Company, habían nacionalizado la Anaconda, habían nacionalizado a la Ford, habían nacionalizado toda la compañía americana. Aquello era otra Cuba. Los retratos de Che Guevara pintados en las paredes de Fidel Castro, esta es tu casa, la revolución, el fin del imperialismo, aquello era.
Pero ¿qué era la idea de tu negocio? ¿Qué era el negocio que querías?
¿Quién?
Tú. ¿Cuál es tu negocio? Papel de negocio.
Pero mi papel era coger informaciones.
Eso para la CIA, pero...
Para la CIA, porque la CIA tenía
sí, no entiendo, pero...
Para poder la CIA administrar las informaciones al cuerpo de inteligencia chileno.
Sí, pero... What was your front? What was your front?
El front, yo era un individuo socialista, con ideas socialistas, buscando intereses donde invertir dinero en países socialistas para sentirme dentro de mi propio, ¿cómo se llama? Sistema político y de ideas socialistas.
We were there in the headquarters of the army, outside Santiago, de Chile. And we were there about 6 or 7 of us. We were there for about half an hour, and suddenly there was a guy dressed in navy blue, very neat, ivy type, blue eyes, a little bit of, no blonde, but semi-blonde hair, American, speaks Spanish very fluent, English and other language, which I presume. he was there, and about 5 minutes after he arrived, Mr. Pinochet, very tall man, very elegant with his uniform, arrived there with 4 of his 8. And this American fellow, which I never got his name, it was no mention whatsoever in the meeting. The only thing that he was from Virginia, CIA, and by his accent, in the way that he would talk, it looked like it was from the New England state, Boston, Vermont, around there, Rhode Island. He said hello, good morning, and this and that, and then he directed himself to Pinochet and said, "Sir, the time have come to do the action that we have already mentioned to you. You have made a decision." And Pinochet said, "Well, I am still in a doubt that that will be the answer to do that, because it will bring a bloodshed inside my country." And the man told him in a very cold, lower voice, "Well, you have 24 hours or less. If you don't make a decision, General, we will get somebody else who will do it. And it's in your hand, your future and your lucky life. In other words, if you don't do it, you will suffer consequences." Mr. Pinochet looked at him very carefully, talking in a very low voice to 2 of his 8, and he responded in English, speak English, "I will give an answer in 2 hours." That was a meeting that I can describe. If I was a painter, I can describe it, painting in a way that is in my mind. 2 hours later, we were at the hotel, at the Sheraton in the mountain. That was our headquarters. And Mr. Suarez, a friend of mine, got a call and say, "The general have accepted." And then, 2 days later, the whole show started. And then, when we hear the bombs, the plane, the tanks, we saw everything going down. So we went in a car, and then we disappeared in the middle of the center of the city. And finally, we went into a hiding place that was controlled by the army. And then, from there, is where I got information from this colonel of the intelligence that CBS, Dan Rather, was announcing in United States that the revolution against Allende have failed, that Allende have won, and they are killing all the pro-American people. At that time, I said, "God damn it, I have my 2 sons, I have my wife." And then I told the guy, they go, "Look, you have to take me." He said, "Manolo, you are crazy. They are bombing the presidential palace."
Pero tú estás loco, digo, no, yo loco no.
And I don't care. So he gave me, how you call it, a hammer, and gave me, how you call it, a jacket, a bulletproof jacket from the army, and identification. And we went into a jeep, army jeep, and we went, oh my God, I don't forget that. We went through downtown. We come about 2 blocks from the presidential palace, and smoke, fire, I mean, people dead in the street, the tanks. That was completely horrible. Then we went to a very narrow street, and suddenly he make a right, and he blew the horn 3 times. We went down like in a garage, open automatic, and we went inside, closed the garage, and inside it was like a headquarters for communication.
For who?
Like a real bunker, but well organized. Yeah, and then there was a vessel, like a merchant vessel, about 20 miles out of Valparaiso. That was a communication center. From there, they got into Clayton Air Base in Panama. From there to Homestead Air Force Base. And from there, they called Paula, they called you, and they called Chucky. And I told you, and I told Chucky, and I told my wife, nothing of what CBS or other stations are saying is true. I mean, Allende is completely destroyed. We never thought that Allende, he will be kill himself. They expecting to take him prisoner and then kill him. I mean, the order was to kill the guy, because if he will be taken prisoner, he will be a hero for the rest of the people.
September 11th. The Chilean military overthrows the government. Surrounding the presidential palace with tanks, armored cars, riflemen, and jet fighter bombers by air, they issue an ultimatum to Allende to either resign or surrender. Allende refuses to do either and dies during the battle. In the days immediately following the coup, thousands of Chileans are killed or simply disappear.
La última oportunidad en que me pueda dirigir a ustedes. La Fuerza Aérea ha bombardeado las torres de radioportales y radiocorporaciones. Mis palabras no tienen amargura sino decepción, y serán ellas el castigo moral para los que han traicionado el juramento que hicieron. Soldados de Chile, comandantes en jefe titulares, y el almirante Merino, que se ha autodesignado, más el señor Mendoza, general rastrero, que solo ayer manifestara su fidelidad y lealtad al gobierno, también será nominado director general del Carabineros. Ante estos hechos, solo me cabe decirle a los trabajadores: yo no voy a renunciar. Colocado en un tránsito histórico, pagaré con mi vida la lealtad del pueblo. Y les digo que tengo la certeza que la semilla que entregáramos a la conciencia digna de miles y miles de chilenos no podrá ser cegada definitivamente. Tienen la fuerza, podrán avasallarnos, pero no se detienen los procesos sociales ni con el crimen ni con la fuerza. La historia es nuestra y la hacen los pueblos. Trabajadores de mi patria, quiero agradecerles la lealtad que siempre tuvieron, la confianza que depositaron en un hombre que solo fue intérprete de grandes anhelos de justicia, que empeñó su palabra y que respetaría la Constitución y la ley, y así lo hizo. En este momento definitivo, el último en que yo pueda dirigirme a ustedes, pero que aprovechen la lección. El capital foráneo, el imperialismo, unido a la reacción, creó el clima para que las Fuerzas Armadas rompieran su tradición. Me dirijo sobre todo a la modesta mujer de nuestra tierra, a la campesina que creyó en nosotros, a la obrera que trabajó más, a la madre que supo nuestra preocupación por los niños.
In the Andes, they say, "The time has come to renew the past. The future is behind. It has not yet arrived." Bisagua, document of pain, etched by torment, in your vacant ruins, your terrible cliffs, your stone prisons and loneliness, they tried to crush the bolting soul, to lay a carpet of dead hearts beneath misfortune, a raging stamp of subjugation. There, through the brackish, empty alleys, the ghosts of desolation shift their mantles. In the naked, shocked fissures lies history, like a memorial buffeted by the forsaken foam. Pisagua, in the emptiness of your peaks, in their furious solitude, the intensity of the truth of hunger appears, a noble monument laid bare. The Cordillera of the Andes Mountains that stretches modern-day Chile's western coast holds nearly 30% of the world's copper reserves. In kind, nearly a third of the copper produced in the world has been and continues to be extracted from the Chilean landscape. This same mountain range holds the oldest mummified human remains in the world, the Chinchorro mummies. Older than their Egyptian siblings, are at least 8,000 years old. Among these remains are the mummies of Pisagua Vieja, whose faces are stained green with copper patination, traces left by copper funereal masks. Studies of the gold and silver surface coatings on similar death masks carried out at MIT's laboratory for research on archaeological materials proved difficult. They came to 3 conclusions. 1, that the metal coatings on any one object are of a relatively uniform thickness and cover all surfaces, including the often paper-thin edges of the object. 2, that there is a solid state diffusion zone between the gold and the copper, indicating that at some stage of the coating process, heat was applied. And 3, that there is no evidence of mercury gilding, the use of gold leaf or foil, or the flushing of molten gold on any of the objects. The most impressive characteristic of these coatings is their extreme thinness and evenness. They look indeed very much like modern electrodeposits, in that all of the features of the coatings could have been the result of electrochemical replacement. During the nitrate boom, at the turn of the 20th century, the earth in Pisagua was opened up again, this time to extract the precious saltpeter to be used as a food preservative and in gunpowder. After the nitrate industry evaporated, the mines of Pisagua were closed. Mid-century, they were reopened, this time to extract copper, and closed again as their productivity was dwarfed by the larger El Teniente and Escondido operations, the largest copper mines in the world. With General Pinochet's coup against President Allende in 1973, Pisagua reverted to its national role as prison. Of the 3 Chilean administrations to have utilized Pisagua's natural isolation as a place of political exile, this last era was the most brutal. The prison became the scene of the cruelest treatment of Pinochet's prisoners. About 40 of the 100 local inhabitants fled town with the arrival of the first warships transporting prisoners. The 7 fishing families, numbering about 60 people, who did stay needed to restructure their lives and keep a low profile. One fisherman actively collaborated with the prison guards, currying favor through gifts of fish and occasional labor. As a result, he became the official controller of the permits required of locals to come and go from town. He still lives in Pisagua. On January 29, 1974, 6 people detained at the Pisagua camp disappeared. The official account was that they were set free. Some of their families received official letters from the Chilean army stating their release. Thus, the wife of one of them received letter number 3550380, dated July 19, 1974, from the commander's office of the 6th Army Division. It stated that Nicolás Chanes was proven innocent with regard to the law and was released. If he has still not returned home, you should look elsewhere for the answer, or ask yourself as a wife who is familiar with her husband's activities. In 1990, their bodies were all found in the common grave at Pisagua. They had been put into sacks. Their hands were tied and they were blindfolded. Orlando Cabello, Nicolás Chanes, Juan Mamani, Luis Manriquez, Hugo Martinez, and Juan Rojas were not released, but were executed without any due process of law, and government agents disposed of their bodies. This language has been borrowed and adapted from Cecilia Vicuña, Pablo Neruda, Heather Lechtman, Leticia Inés Cortés, Maria Cristina Scatolin, Bernardo T. Ariaza, Sarah Keen Meltzoff, Michael Lemons, Yair G. Lichtenstein, and the report of the Chilean National Commission on Truth and Reconciliation. Translations are my own. Ritual and art evolved from the R in arm, creating a ritual act. A gesture's intention tunes itself to life's thread. A tone is a thread, awakening to itself. The thread remembers birthing, the transformation of meaning through collective ritual acts. Cecilia Vicuña. Quipu, from the Quechua word for knot, are lengths of textile capable. Sorry, excuse me. I've got too many things in my hands here. Here we go. Quipu, from the Quechua word for knot, are lengths of textile capable of encoding staggering amounts of information. Employing a system of knots, color coding, and untold other material metrics, complex mathematical accounting histories and prophecies were and are stored in the woven strands of Quipu. The American Museum of Natural History has said that the Quipu is the earliest example of the decimal system in the Western world. The oldest known Quipu is approximately 5,000 years old, predating the examples that the museum was looking at by 2,000 years. A number of research discoveries since 1994 point to Quipu being capable of coding language beyond numerical systems, which situates it not only as one of the earliest forms of mathematics, but as one of the earliest forms of human writing, on par with Sumerian cuneiform and Egyptian glyphs. Furthermore, some scholars believe that Quipu, in fact, capable of coding vastly more complex forms of information in proto-binary computing language. Learning from Cecilia Vicuña, who uses Quipu to weave together communities and landscapes, here I braid my own. Instead of wool and fibers, these are made of soft copper wire, wound in tight coils around iron, mostly nails and magnets. These Quipu have a tendency to react with electromagnetic fields, variably called pickup coils or induction coils. Depending on how charge is applied to them, these Quipu are sensitive to those wavelengths that otherwise elude me. They encode what is ambient and inaudible. Not yet, but already moving. I am reminded of a peculiar sense of return. Tedious, concentric coils, each iteration tightly adjacent and nearly identical, over time develop into a sensitive organ, oriented towards change. The concentric coils mirror echoic memory, as the first coil's primacy is subsumed by its repetition. Sitting here, winding, I watch my hands. I dial in on their stillness, in cool anticipation of the onset of tremor.
volver a los 17, después de vivir un siglo, es como descifrar signos, sin ser sabio competente, volver a ser de repente, tan frágil como un segundo, volver a sentir profundo, como un niño frente a Dios. Eso es lo que siento yo en este instante fecundo. Se va enredando, enredando, como en el muro la hiedra, y va brotando, brotando, como el mosquito en la piedra, como el mosquito en la piedra.
There it is. Sorry, everyone. That was hopefully the last technical issue here. What I was saying was thank you for bearing with me through this long... I know, it's going to work in a second. It should work in a second. Everyone is texting me saying they can't hear me. Okay, good. I wanted to say thank you, firstly, to Violeta Parra for this music, Lupe Echavarria, my grandmother, David Gonzalez, Annie Harold, Reina Sokolov Gonzalez, Lisa Sokolov, Bonnie Jones, Juan Mobley, Charles Gonzalez, Jim Moses, Patricia Ibarra, Wang Lu, Amanda Anderson, Ed Osborne, Emily Dolan, Jonathan Stern, Tamara Chin, Damian Mahiet, Peter Zendi, Andy Braddock, Evan Doorbell, Richard Willett, Mapi Torres, Tanya Bruguera, Kareem Estefan, Regina Pike, Noman Hassan, Pablo Amarca, Katyani Seth, Andresa Macena Maya, Katie Contes, Alessandro Mograbi, Baoli Yang, Rafe Scobithal, Eamon O'Rourke, Courtney Lau, Inga Chinilina, Yaniv Kott, Erica Newton, Goro Ikeda Ieki, Michael Foster, Elsa Raker, Hannah Mitchell, Grace from Dugan Custom Jewelry, who helped me with all those patina things, Seth Papak, who also helped me with those, Roz Messenai, Harpo Harold, Willa Jones, and Katie Vinclet and the Brown Arts Initiative. We're going to have a Zoom party now. I'm sorry, my mood does not match the intensity of the material. It's just that I've been looking at it so much. I want to thank everyone for coming. And there's a paper that is very much the kind of companion to this piece. And so please just put your email in the chat, or send me a message, or get in touch. However, you can send me a contact through the website. There's a contact form there, and I'd be happy to circulate it. It goes into much more depth around all of the historical context and the way that I went about producing the work. I'm going to send... How am I going to do this? I'm going to send... Can someone post the Zoom link in the chat? If not, I will do it in 1 second. Yeah. Thanks again, everyone. This has been just wonderful. Okay, I'm going to text it to Annie, and she's going to put it for everyone else to look at. Annie's got it. Okay. I'm going to stop talking into this thing now. If I can figure out how to do that.